she also wants this brand new thing that nobody has done before. And she wants to carve out her own path that there is no blueprint for. And those things being at odds with each other is kind of what's at the center of this season for Midge.
So the first question's for Alex. After everything went so wrong for Midge and Susie at the end of season 3, how anxious were you to get back together after the long delay to see how everybody put their lives back together?
Well, it's a very true point, is that the fans are like, oh my God, hurry, we can't wait. And we're in the same boat. Like, we have no future knowledge of what's going to be or what's happening with our characters. And it leaves us hanging to a certain extent, even more so than the audience. So we were very eager, both as actors and as characters, to kind of get back to it. And this whole season we do kind of pick up after that horrible fall, and we have to pick up the pieces and see if they can fit back together again. And I think Susie wants to put everything back together like it was, and Midge has her sights set much higher. She wants to put it back in a different way and change the picture that the puzzle will ultimately become.
Build back better, as they say.
Yeah. And Rachel, the first episode really does sort of feel like a reset too for the series again. And part of that also involves going back to the Weissman's original apartment. So what was it like to go back to that set, but in a different, just a little different way?
It felt amazing just to be in that apartment again. We said goodbye to the Weissman apartment at the end of last season. And so to start this season after having been away for so long in a set that felt so familiar from the very beginning of the show was a great way to kick us back off. Change is hard, and Midge wants two really different and competing things, which is she wants to go back to a time when things were easier and simpler and more comfortable. She wants her old apartment. She wants sometimes, not necessarily this season, but over the seasons, like a simpler relationship with Joel. She wants to be happy and comfortable and feel like herself. And at the same time, she also wants this brand new thing that nobody has done before. And she wants to carve out her own path that there is no blueprint for. And those things being at odds with each other is kind of what's at the center of this season for Midge.
It's an interesting conflict inside the same character.
Yeah.
But one of the other big cast additions this year was Milo Ventimiglia came in, and we still don't really know what he's doing in the show.
He's doing Susie in the show. It's a torrid love affair.
There's lots of acrobatics. It's pretty intense and boundary pushing for television as we know it.
Yeah.
Well, it's also funny that Midge's costumes are so outrageous throughout, the show has gone on. And it's funny watching, the difference between Midge and Susie's costumes. And like, how are you and Amy Sherman-Palladino, like, how do you guys decide the costumes for each scene, and what goes into the planning of that?
Most of that it happens all inside Donna Zakowska's brain, our incredible costume designer. And honestly, I just show up. It's one of the best parts about being on this show is we have really nothing else to do but show up. The writing is so amazing. The costumes are so amazing. The set is so amazing. It's one of my favorite parts of every episode is walking into the costume shop, seeing 100 new pairs of shoes and sketches on the wall of everything that Donna's envisioning. But Donna's a brilliant storyteller. She has a really clear sense of how the costumes can enhance the storytelling in any particular scene. And sometimes I feel like I leave a costume fitting having a better understanding of the story we're telling from conversations with Donna. But she also keeps pushing herself. There's more colors and patterns and insane hats and beautiful shapes this season. We're entering the 60s, so there's definitely more fun to be had in that department.
And Alex, do you have any comments on your costumes?
I mean, I usually have weird little things that I ask for. I'll say, what about a pipe? I want to smoke a pipe, or I'd like a vest, and could I have a pocket watch? I mean, I have very weird little asks, and they're usually very giving in letting me have those things. But certainly I don't have the same level of, my fittings are much shorter. I go in, I see if the pants still fit. If they do, they make a few other pairs in different fabric, and the shirts. Yeah, it's much simpler. And I'm sure, before Donna gets going, I'm sure, Amy and her sit and discuss the tone and go through the outlines of the episodes. And Amy's a huge part of all of that direction. And some of it is scripted sometimes in the direction. And so everything starts in Amy's brain, and then it permeates and percolates through everyone else's.
Are you all still having like input in the characters, or does Amy just have such a definitive vision that you're just, bringing her words to life?
Yeah.
There's a few times where I text her something crazy, and I say, I want to do this, just some weird action, or I have some image or physical bit, and 8 times out of 10, she'll try to make it happen. But in terms of storyline or development, that's all Amy.
Yeah. She usually texts me a number of weird texts about once a season, because I'm convinced that they sit around thinking of new ways to try to murder me. But, once a season, I'll get a text before we start going, can you ice skate? Do you speak French? Can you bowl? Do you play ping pong? Can you ride a bike? And I'm just like, oh God, what are we going to be up to?
Well,
Wow.
And in the first episode of this season, there's the crazy Wonder Wheel conversation.
Yeah.
How difficult was it to pull that off? It's like conducting an orchestra to figure out how to get that done.
It's pretty amazing. And it's a scene I'm so glad you asked, because I want to talk to everybody about this incredible feat that this entire team pulled off. But, obviously Amy envisioned this scene, and then a million other people got panicked for a minute and then got to work figuring out how to make it happen. And we actually shot the exterior at Coney Island. And then we spent 2 days in essentially a warehouse on one of our sets with one car, and we all rotated in and out of the car one at a time. And so we basically spent 2 days screaming at whoever was in the car, and shot for, a couple hours each. And they made the whole thing come together in post. We have an incredible VFX supervisor, Leslie, who had a little model and dreamed the whole thing up. But that scene was extraordinary, and it never got less funny. And then the loopier we got, the funnier it got somehow. And so I can't wait for people to see that scene.
It must have been just a feat of acting to visualize everyone yelling across from.
Oh, we all lost our voices, and eventually they said something which relieved us of that pressure. Because I was like, I don't know where anyone is in relationship to me, and they were just like, nobody knows. The more you look around, the crazier you'll look, and that's what we want.
Alex, before I go, I did have one non-Maisel question for you. Since with family, just about Family Guy. Just since the show is now in its 20th season, and we were wondering if you ever see yourself stepping away from that show. It's just gone on for so long.
It's insane, right? I was 15 when we started. Can you believe it? No, I will stay on that ship until it is completely underwater. I love those people. I love that character. And, as long as the writers are able to come up with stories that in some way are fresh and interesting. Every time I read a script, I laugh out loud. So that's my measure. My barometer is if I'm still laughing when I receive a script, then it's still a pleasure to do.
Well, that sounds great. And Mrs. Maisel is just as funny. Thank you two so much for speaking with us, and wish you the best of luck on season 4. Tony, I want to start with you. It's really fascinating in the show for season 4. Abe is now a theater critic, which is really cool. Do you think this is one way that Midge and Abe could sort of come together again to be closer now that they're both in a creative atmosphere?
I definitely think their lives are starting to converge slowly. Certainly, we're gonna begin to see that in season 4, where they're both, especially after the crash and burn moment of Midge's career at the end of season 3, right? Where she's bounced off of the tour, Shy Baldwin's tour. So now both Abe and Midge are kind of having to regroup and start over. And I think for Abe, it's like he's discovering this, it's a humbling moment for him. And, where he's happy to be working at this job, but he's taking a massive cut in pay. And, no longer, now he's not living in his own home anymore, of course. And so they're beginning to there's almost a bit of a role reversal that is in the offing, I think, where she is going to be starting to become the caretaker and the grown up, I guess you could say.
Yeah. It must be really hard for Abe to sort of come to grips with that idea that like now he has to rely on his daughter who's in a job that he initially didn't even approve of.
Yes, exactly. It's humbling. And, there's going to be probably alcohol involved in his future.
So Kevin, while Abe is getting a greater appreciation of what Midge does, Moishe is now struggling to connect with Joel because he's got his new job as nightclub owner. But the two actually do have something in common because they're both entrepreneurs. Are the father and son going to figure that out and maybe fix their relationship?
Well, listen, Moishe's decision to tell his son to get out of the garment district handed me what at the time was large check of money to start his new life. I think the nightclub represents him pursuing his own ambition and dream, which is ultimately all Moishe wanted. The idea of being involved with show folk, as you see Moishe's reaction to Midge all along, every time she mentions she's a comedian, and he says, "But you're not funny." The idea that Joel would go into the nightclub business, and in Moishe's mind, what does he know from that? There's going to be some conflict. But I just love how both families find out about Midge being not on the road while at Coney Island on this Wonder Wheel. That was pretty stupefying and wonderful.
How crazy was it to film that? Because you're having like a whole conversation on a Ferris wheel and you're yelling back and forth. How did that work out?
I can promise you it was much more bizarre than you think.
Yes, we're not really sure how we did it, frankly. It was kind of one of those miraculous things that our genius creators and cinematographers crew helped to make happen.
Was it really impressive to see how they could not only it must always be a challenge to recreate that atmosphere, but to do it under the circumstances of today where you're trying to stay safe during the pandemic, how it must have been kind of just crazy to watch them work.
Yeah, that scene at Coney Island leading up to the Wonder Wheel where we're walking through and it's shot as a oneer and all one take, and there are hundreds of extras around us. A year ago, January of 2021 was a pretty scary time, germ-wise. And so we went, from isolation to that. But being in the outdoors, certainly.
But we also had a very strict COVID protocol the whole time. Much, daily testing, and if there, and we all at one point we were very young. We started carrying little tracers in our clothes, in our wardrobe, so they could tell that if anyone ever did test positive, then they would know who intersected with that person at any given moment. It was super high tech.
Wait a second. Are we not supposed to still be carrying those?
Did you take yours home with you?
Are they still tracking you?
Honey, throw out the tracer.
Well, maybe they'll work in the Cold War spy tactics, and you'll.
Yeah, Tony's not wrong or exaggerating. We were tested within an inch of our lives on a daily basis, as was the crew and everyone. And it was severe protocols.
Well, Kevin, since you come from this world of comedy yourself, has it ever been frustrating that you don't get to do stand-up comedy in the show?
Well, it's been one of the bizarre twists of my so-called career. I made a left-hand turn somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s into dramatic acting, which was not the plan or what I had trained for. So this whole thing has been a surprise and a bizarro world ride. But here we are. You know, the great joy for me was spending time with Luke Kirby. His work as Lanny Bruce is astonishing. And Rachel, coming from this dramatic acting background, to be able to realize the authenticity of being on stage, that live, live and die by every nanosecond, based on the live audiences. And those monologues that Amy and Dan write are so true that I don't really have a sense of why am I not doing that. It's more of a sense of, well, they got this right.
Yeah. Well, I also, since you actually did work, I hope you don't mind me asking, but since you did work with Bob Saget on his last movie that he directed, I was just wondering if you had any sort of memories of working with him that you'd like to share, just super quick.
Oh yeah, no, I love working with Bob. Known him through stand-up, obviously, from the early 80s. And he was kind enough to be a subject in the documentary I directed called Misery Loves Comedy. And then, yeah, the last thing he directed, I was one of the actors in. And yeah, a sense of one of the nicest, sweetest, most loving men in any business. But also I instantly regretted how often I yelled at him on the set of his movie that he didn't know what the hell he was doing.
Well, Tony, just before I leave, you probably get asked about Monk all the time, but with so many revivals and reunions coming along, is there any sort of chance that Monk comes back?
There is a good chance, actually. We're in discussion now about like a movie, a TV movie of Monk returning, kind of folding in the pandemic story. And,
oh yeah,
it's exciting. We haven't seen the script yet, but it is definitely in the planning stages. I can say that.
And you get to break that story, Daniel.
Oh yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and wish you the best of luck on season 4. Marin, in the new season, there's a big reset because the Weissman family is finally moving back in their own apartment. Mm-hmm. Did you really miss that set? And what was it like to get back in there?
It's such a great question. Nobody's asked us that today. Thank you. Yeah, I missed it so much. Let me tell you something. All the years I lived in New York, and there's been decades, never have I had an apartment like that particular soundstage set. And there were moments during the pre-COVID years, I took a couple of my relatives and, they've created a real apartment that we used for the pilot. And it has even like the very scratches or the faucets, every single detail was redone. And I remember when they told us that we were going to have to leave the apartment, it was a goodbye with tears. As I walked around, I touched the wallpaper and I touched the lamps and I touched the piano. And I was like, this is the best apartment I've ever been into. And then they never tell us anything. So little did I know we would be revisiting it. Right. And so when we heard any news that we could possibly have a reconnection to such a thing, then that was a delightful, let's say, just a very jubilant reconnection that I was ecstatic about. I'm not sure we're actually supposed to talk about this, but yes, because you've seen those episodes, this happens.
I have friends that live in the Maisel apartment building, and I go to their apartment all the time. And they said the set is so authentic because that is their apartment. They've been chopped up. They're not that big. Like that apartment now is probably 3 apartments on a floor, but every detail, every sconce, everything they said is exactly like the apartment they live in.
Yeah.
And Caroline, since season 4 was so delayed because of the pandemic, was it difficult to get back into the rhythm of the show?
No, it was so exciting. It was like, finally, We just could not wait. I will say that, during the pandemic, I didn't remember how to get dressed or leave the house. But once I got there, once I actually arrived there, it sort of all came back to me. I mean, I had profound inertia set in. After a while, first I was like very frustrated and this has got to be over soon and I have to go be all the things. And then, when you finally just have to give in to what's going on and then somebody says, get up, and you're like, really have to get off the couch now? I can't remember how to do that. But I'm telling you, you enter the magic kingdom when you enter this world. And so that became our energy.
And your performances have been so brilliant, and it reminds me, and I think a lot of other viewers, of their own mothers. And what is it about Amy Sherman-Palladino's writing that really makes these characters so relatable, even though, the events of the show are happening 50 years ago, but they still seem so relatable today?
I don't think she even knows. You know what I mean? It's like, I think if you ask Amy, I don't even think that she knows. I think she starts from truth. I think that is very important to her. She never writes a joke for a joke's sake. It is everything has to be character driven in order to be there. Authenticity is deeply important to she and Dan, and they spend so much time thinking about these characters, who they are. And you're right. People, these women, these characters are walking around in the world with us. And that's how people are responding when they come up to us. They go, you're like my mother, you're like my aunt, you're like my teacher, you know what I mean? It's like, so you know that they exist in the world. And I think, it's just, they are channeling something. They're so brilliant that because they keep coming up with it. You go, okay, once, twice, 1 season, 2 seasons, but they keep outdoing themselves. That's what's so amazing. You just go, it was really nice when the show was good. Remember that a couple seasons ago, and then you get a new season. You're like, I can't believe it. They've outdone themselves again. It's never usually like this, Daniel, tell you, as I'm sure you know.
Well, Marin, for Rose has still struggled with the idea that Midge's career is as a comedian.
Yes.
And that's been like this ongoing thread, and Marin sort of finding her own sense of humor too. Does Rose get any closer to coming to terms with the career choice in this new season?
I think as she moves out into a place that she never imagined she could be, that I think my hope is that she will also understand that in her daughter too. I think it's hard. It seems hard. I'm a parent, right? And so is Caroline. And how do I put this? Like, I try so hard not to let my son know what I'm wanting him to do, because A, he will then do the opposite, right? And B, like, I'm trying really hard not to do maybe what I thought my parents often did to me. But for whatever reason, like for instance, at college I went to, my son would have been, I think, a very perfect choice for him. But he told me recently, he's like, there's no way I could have done it, because even though you pretended that you didn't want me to go, I knew you wanted me to go, right? So anyway, but back to this situation is that I think my character is slow at accepting that her daughter is really not the person that I thought she was going to be. And this very saucy, brilliant child I knew, but I never knew she was going to, as Rose puts it, sort of like sell that and sell the own private stuff that is our family out to the world. And that would be, by the way, hard for many a parent, correct? Is to have a comedian child, because I know people who do this for a living, and the family members have to sit there and go like, oh God, I'm going to be outed, right? In my own way, in terms of like every little secret, funny, goofy part of myself is now part of the world. And this is true for all writers, of course. But anyway, so I think that in answer to your question, I think Rose will move towards a place of more acceptance, but she has to sort of still continue to grapple with some of her own demons on that one. It's a little bit slower than maybe she should take on that one.
And change for everyone in the show has been sort of like this ongoing thing where everything's going in different ways. And it's interesting that both sets of parents now have their children in jobs that they didn't really see themselves in.
That's right.
Joel is a nightclub owner now.
Yeah.
So which set of parents do you think has accepted their children's decisions better?
Us.
Yeah, I think they do. I think there's more wiggle room for a boy.
in this particular time. You have to remember, not only do the Weissmans have to accept Midge working, being single, but there are no other female comedians. They don't have anything to refer to. Who else does this? You know what I mean? Besides their daughter. So they don't even have the comfort of going, well, this woman did it and she's okay. It was just so unusual.
Yeah.
I think it's very disappointing that Joel's not part of, his dad's business. That was always the plan, that you would pass that on. That's part of your legacy. But I think what trumps that, at least for Shirley, and I think also absolutely for Moish, is that his happiness takes priority over any of our expectations. And that's just who they are.
And, Moishe can still say that Joel's a business owner too.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
Again, he has those bragging rights. He does. He's not a Garmento, but still.
Mhm.
All right. Well, it was so wonderful to speak with both of you today.
Thank
about
you.
the
Such a
show.
pleasure to talk to you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Michael Zegen and Luke Kirby from Marvelous of Maisel. It's so great to talk to you guys.
Yeah, likewise.
Congrats on season 4.
Thank you.
And Michael, I got to tell you, I really love the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit behind you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'll start with you, Michael.
I like the Mandalorian behind you.
Oh, thank you. It would have been kind of easy for Amy Sherman Palladino to leave Joel behind after he left Midge, but she hasn't. Has it been surprising for you to see how she can keep Joel around in the story to focus on his own struggles while she's, struggling herself?
I mean, I think that's what makes this so interesting. Yes, when I first read the pilot, I honestly thought that it was a one-off. That's one and done, and maybe you never see him again. But then I looked at the character breakdown and said he was a series regular, so that made me want the part only that much more. But yeah, I just find that so interesting because he is a character who could have been written off and you wouldn't have batted an eyelash, and that's that. But instead they spent a lot of time delving into his character and watching him grow and watching him evolve and watching his relationship with Midge evolve. And I think it's just it's almost like just as important an aspect of the show and to Midge as comedy is.
And Luke, Lenny Bruce is kind of also is another character that you didn't really expect to come in as often as he has.
Mm-hmm.
Has it been difficult to play the one fictionalized version of a real person on this show?
If for the most part, no, it's been more fun than anything else. I mean, I think that Amy and Dan have done a really good job at kind of balancing out how we kind of measure that responsibility. I think that they do feel kind of duty bound to the historic Lenny Bruce's legacy. And at the same time, it's a great fortune to be sort of freed of having to kind of be too specific, certainly in the way that you would with a biopic, in terms of timeline and the specificities around, getting everything down pat. So that's been kind of just a lucky privilege to not have to adhere to that so strictly. But at the same time, I think that we've kind of, tried to maintain, certainly in the routines that I do, those are always verbatim from, live performances that Lenny Bruce did. And I know that their intention with him was never to, if he was ever going to be on the stage doing stand-up, that he would never be performing something that they wrote, that it was always something that Lenny Bruce had performed. And so, I think that they've done a good job at sort of, balancing that out. I feel lucky for it.
And you also just came off of playing Ted Bundy. Was it exciting to get back to playing Lenny Bruce? Because it's a little bit of a lighter
yeah, of course,
than Ted Bundy.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, this job on Maisel is it's such a thrill to participate in for so many reasons. I mean, setting Lenny Bruce aside for a second, the production is just really, really rich. It's bold, it's massive. We're in New York City. It's the city we live in. You know, Amy and Dan are insanely hardworking people, you know, who I think expect the same in kind from everybody on board. And so every season, you know, the cast and the crew is sort of, you know, given this, you know, duty to kind of raise their bar, and it's always just a pleasure. It's just such an exciting place to come, and most certainly is a little bit lighter in fare.
Yeah.
You know?
Michael, is it interesting that Joel is still in show business in some way? That, you know, he dreamed of being in show business, and now he's in show business now as a club owner. Why do you think Joel has a hard time trying to find a different route to success?
Well, I mean, it's not always so cut and dry. I think me personally, you know, Michael, I grew up knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I've wanted to be an actor since I was 5 years old, but I have friends who are my age who still don't know what they want. So I think I think that that's real. That's, you know, and I wouldn't say he's having a hard time finding it. I think he found it. I mean, he clearly, you know, it took him a few tries, but he found it. And you know, I think originally he had his sights set on being a stand-up comedian. Whether that was a realistic goal of his, you know, that remains to be seen, because you kind of have to write your own material at some point. But he clearly, it didn't work out, but he still, you know, wanted to be a part of that world. And I think that that's also so real. You know, he found another job in a different kind of area. You know, I had a friend who was an actor who became an agent, or I had a friend who was an actor who became a acting teacher. You know, I think that that's real. That's what happens. If something doesn't work out, you find something else, perhaps kind of parallel to that world that brings you the same kind of joy.
And we did meet Stephanie Hsu's character in season 3.
Stephanie Hsu, yeah.
Hsu. And can we expect to see that relationship continue to blossom in season 4?
She will be in season 4. Whether or not that relationship blossoms remains to be seen. But yeah, she'll be there.
I thought it was interesting your Joel's relationship with the characters in Chinatown. It was sort of fun. How was it really fun to sort of put that together? How Joel would interact with those characters?
Oh yeah, you know. I guess that goes back to the first episode of last season, and when I read that, you know, it just looked like it was going to be so much fun, and then actually filming that first scene where we discover, you know, they're down there. I mean, they were, you know, going nuts with all the gambling and everything. I mean, it's just it brought a new element to Joel's storyline, and I loved it. I thought it's hilarious.
Was it impressive in the first episode? You're in this whole like recreation of 1950s Coney Island. Is that impressive to see how the production was able to pull that off?
It's always impressive. You know, anything they do is impressive. But yeah, it was an impressive, sure. But at the same time, it's like there was no question they were going to do it, and they were going to do it right. But it's, you know, at the same time, it was also like cold. You know, it's supposed to be like, it was supposed to be summer, and I think we filmed it, I think at the beginning of April. I could be wrong. Maybe it's the beginning of May. Regardless, it was actually like very cold. But you still had, you know, and that's the beauty of Maisel. You still had these hundreds of extras. Everybody's dressed, you know, in perfect 1960s garb, and you're on set, and you just feel like you're in that time period because everybody else is.
It's been wonderful talking to you. Thanks for putting up with the camera.
Yeah, no problem.
Earlier. So wish you the best of luck on season 4, and thanks a lot for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.